Called meeting to order.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we have a new version of this. It's slightly different. This one's dated April 7th versus this one from last time, which was March 31st. There isn't a lot of changes to this. We had Ken go through and balance everything, and he did find a few errors in here. So page 39 of this document. Oops. Page 39 of this document has these tax-supported funds. I'm just going to say that the special ed fund, it was me and the committed funds. I had where we do the delta, I had it in as a positive, and Ken said, wait, that's supposed to be a negative. So that turned into a fairly big change here. So we have $47.5 million of expenditures now in the special ed fund, versus I think it was right around 48 versus 48.45. So that fund does have a little bit of positive flow in it, which is a good thing because that fund balance had been fairly low in the past. So that's the biggest change of this. Then in the general fund, we did match up a few other things. If you go all the way back, general fund changed slightly. There was some where we were just pulling, our system was pulling from the wrong recommended packet. It wasn't much of a change there though, as well. So then, anyway, this is what our total new tax supported looks like. Total budget's 281, and within that about 5 million. That money out of the capital outlay would be transferred over into the general fund. So if you take that figure off there, we're looking at about 286 or so million dollars of tax-supported funds that we're spending when you take out the double budget for the transfer over to the general fund. I just want to then go back to page 5, jumping around here, I know. Looking at the general fund plan, and then the yellow version of it, I guess. Yeah, so if you look at the version that shows these variables right here on page 5, we've matched up a little bit better to the federal program. Some of that changed from when our first committee looked at that. So we have ongoing COVID expenditures of $2.3 million that we had to build into that budget. We didn't spend as much early on, so we end up with a little bit higher. We're at 8.5 out here as a fund balance as a percent of prior year expenditures at the end of the 5-year period. However, it is dropping 0.6% in that year. We'll have to flatten that out a little bit as we go. I think we were at 7.8 though when we were in here last time. So that's mostly because we have more COVID expenditures, line 29, built into the budget out here that it'll have to take over in 25, 2.3. We had a smaller number last time. So we're going to have to absorb that into the budget when we get out into 26, or actually 27 is the year. Next year when we do the 5-year plan, we'll have to have that flattened out and hitting about 8%. So we're somewhere between 8 and 8.5% when we build this budget next year. It isn't in horrible shape, but it's slightly different than where we were before, and it's got a little bit more of a drop to it. But it's still, it was 2.6 million the year before. It's a negative million that year, $1 million into the fund balance. So we did have $1.3 million and $3.9 million in the first 2 years. So it is flattening out a bit. But the other thing we've got here is we are showing an efficiency factor out here in FY26 of 0.75, which is fairly, it's a good number. It's a fairly significant number. So we always build that in. Without it, our budget would never balance out into the future. So we have it at 0.75 next year, and we have it at 0.5 as we absorb that 2.3 and then we have it at 0.75 out there. Just know that, you know, Kirk, Dr. Zeke had shown you a fairly extensive plan for spending the federal money. We flipped around the plans in that, so that follows these in your document this time instead of leading off. I would just say we will build that into the budget in July. So there will be a federal, there'll be a ESSER 1, an ESSER 2, and an ESSER 3 cost center that isn't showing up in this budget yet. So that'll be approved when we kind of get all that ironed out. So our budget, the dollar amount will be fairly a bit more significant. It'll be all federal. But we did try to build in the ongoing expenditures that are going to show up in FY25 that are going to be covered by the ESSER funds in the meantime into this plan. And it was a little bit more than we looked at in middle of March when we met with the budget committee. So that's kind of the bigger changes, not a lot to these documents. Fed looks in better shape. General fund actually looks in better shape out as a percent of the budget, but it is spending a little bit more into it than in that last year than it was prior to that. Other than that, I'd stand by for questions, and if they get real detailed, we've got a whole bunch of folks out here that can probably answer them. Thanks.
And just to clarify, I want to make sure I got this right. So for the public more than anything in the Argus here, so this budget is basically non-COVID funds except for out in the forecasting in 2025, those expenditures that would be associated with what we've taken on that. So when we approve our budget in July, those COVID funds, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3 will be implemented in there. So that's why you will see a bigger increase on that budget line. Yeah,
you'll just, you know, we have those federal programs. We haven't done that yet because we're still sorting out what's COVID 1, what's COVID 2, what's COVID 3. We have the general plan. We have it in page 2 shows you that I'm sorry, it's page 9 in this document. Page 9 was where Dr. Zeke had totaled those up right now, and that's where we had showed a minus 560, but we can kind of offset that. 560,000, we can offset that with indirect costs as long as the total indirect costs exceeds the negative amount, we can offset it with that. So because we don't have to take those indirect costs, we just got it built in there because typically we do charge it if the grant allows it and the grant can afford it, we do charge it. So since the indirect costs are in excess of the total balance there, we're not, when it flips, we would be concerned, but right now it looks fine. So we just don't have those loaded into a budget yet, but you will get those in the July, the final approval of the budget. We will have that total figured out, what goes exactly where at that time for that meeting. So yeah, I think the answer to your question, President Mickelson, is yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions about any parts of the budget?
Seeing none, I'd like to open it up for public input on proposed FY22 budget. Did anyone? Seeing none, I will close that. Any other comments or go to the board for the budget before we move into executive session? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move into executive session per SDCL 1-25-2 paren 3?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll move into exec session.